Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your miners have practically built themselves.
Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv and welcome to my 3rd anniversary show. Yeah, 3 years. It was 3 years ago we started this journey together and we've picked up quite a few friends on the way. The one thing I really didn't expect to happen was I would get to meet so many wonderful folks. There's so many of you that comment quite frequently, and it's just a joy to get to know you and to hear the things that you have to say. And I never realized that would be a part of this great journey. So thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a part of Mad Dog Merv's world. I'm doing some editing tonight. I'm putting together the 3rd anniversary show. And I thought what we would do, well, I thought we would put together some pieces that were kind of incomplete that I've shot over the past couple of years that I needed to finish a couple of little parts of, or there's parts missing, so I'm gonna have to fill in the gaps tonight. So without further ado, most of these are tips and tricks. Let's look at our 3rd anniversary show.
Well, first out of the gate, I have put together a new logo for the channel. Thought it was much more appropriate than the yellow cougar, although I like cougars, but I drive a black and white 2010 Mustang with a GT350 stripe on the side. So that's what I decided to make. It took about 8 hours. So first up, as far as the projects, here is a 32 Ford fenders that a gentleman had wanted me to fill in this big where the spare tire was, because he was building one that was flat fendered. So okay, yeah, I'll do it. We agreed on a price, and I'll show you what the price was here at the end. But you can see this underside, the bulge, and I decided what I would do. So I took a cutting tool on my Dremel, and I went ahead and I cut that out the best that I could without damaging the surfaces around it. And here you can kind of see how that turned out. Then I took a filed it down. I wound up having to take an X-Acto knife and just did the best I could to get that as flat as I possibly could before we made the plug. So here, if we look at the top, you can kind of see how thick this area is, and it's thicker in other areas than it is in others. So I'm going to have to build a plug, and I decided I'm going to put the plug in from the top down. I'm going to have some filling to do here, and on the bottom I'm going to have sanding and filling to do. So I made the plug out of this styrene. I can't even tell you if it's aught 20 or aught 30. It's just a scrap piece I had, and I measured, as you can see, and I cut this piece out. Got it in place with some Tamiya ultra thin cement, and yeah, you can see there's some low area. You can see here in the top view, yeah, it's flat, and I've got to try to round it a little bit, so I'm going to have quite a bit of shaping to do on this. So I'm going to use some white putty, a Squadron white putty that I have, and I like to mix that with the Mr. Color Thinner. And it works very well to mix this together. It gives me kind of a softer paste, if you will, and I'm able to put it on, and it works great. A few minutes later, and I can sand it. Now, I've lost the parts of the video where I did all of those processes. So all I have left here is the very end. And once, I got to tell you, I did about 7 or 8 times, as well as several coats of primer to get this thing this smooth. I even used polishing pads at the very end, because again, I'm doing this for a gentleman. I don't usually do commission work, but I really wanted this to look just right for this guy. He was recommended by MRS Hobbies. He'd gone out and talked to those folks. My friend Doug said, yeah, Merv will do it. So anyway, here is what I got paid. Here is what we decided that I would get. And I was the happiest boy ever when I gave him the parts, and he got me the 12-pack of Dr. Pepper. Oh yeah, I was tickled. So next up here on our tips and tricks, I have this Altoids container, and I thought, what can I do with this? I was putting together a piece on making dioramas, and I thought, let's make a little small one, shall we? So I took a 1/700 scale Quonset hut, a grass shack that I have in 1/700 scale, as well as a longboat. And we're going to have some fun with this. So I measure out my styrofoam, get my X-Acto knife out, and start cutting. Cut it as tight as I can to fit inside the bottom of the Altoids container. Now I'm going to take one edge of it and cut it back on an angle to simulate where the beach would be, because I'm going to have water in here. So this is going to have land and a beach. I took some white glue, some water, and some Panzer Yellow, mixed it together, put this on the styrofoam. And I have some red beach sand, and I love the red sand. So this is what we're going to put on it because, well, it's my diorama. So that's what I'm doing. So I put that all over, and we're going to wait for it to dry. I'm going to move some of it back here. I'm going to attach with some white glue the Quonset hut and the grass shack. You can see I've kind of pulled that dirt back a little bit. I've got some clump foliage in a green that I like. Actually, I used a couple of greens. We're going to attach it with some white glue around the buildings. Now, I'm taking my armor sand, and I'm going to spray kind of a beach area. I know, it's red. Anyway, it's how I decided to do it. Then I took a green, I don't know which green, put that in the airbrush, and feathered that in a little bit. And finally, a blue, and feathered that in along the very edge here, kind of simulating the deeper part of the water. So once it's in, I use my Liquitex Gloss Heavy Gel, and I love to use this stuff to simulate water. And I'm going to goop some of that in the area where I want the beach to be. I'm going to take the end of this paintbrush here, and I'm going to kind of push it into the areas I want, kind of simulate some chop to the waves. And I put the boat in. I painted the boat, put the boat in, got a flagstaff off of one of my 700 scale ships with an American flag, and voila. And here, several months later, it is dry, and what a cute little diorama this makes. Kind of a fun little thing to do. So the next piece I have up here is a Panther tank that I did some work on for MRS Hobbies. And let's look at this video.
Follow-up to Saturday's program from MRS Hobby, and just kind of show how the Panther turned out that we were working on at MRS. And you can see I now have the side skirts on. You can see how the mudding actually turned out when it's dry, there on the front and on the top and on the back deck. And you can kind of see how the wheels turned out on this side. And this is the side we worked on at MRS on Saturday. And so you can kind of see how that went. You really can't see down inside, but if you can, a little bit there, you can see it's kind of a shiny, glossy mud. And you can see how it dried on the tracks. It definitely, with that gloss that we'd talked about. So it kind of gives us that wet mud appearance. Yeah, so there you go. The finished product on our mudding job of the Panther.
Okay, and for our final piece, this is a T-23 turret from a Dragon kit that I need to put some texture on. So I'm going to show you how I did the texture and how it turned out.
I'm going to put some texture on this turret for an M4 Sherman. It's an Easy 8 kit from Dragon. It's a real old kit. And I want to put some texture on this turret. So I'm going to take a little bit of red automotive putty. We're going to see how this works. See if I can soften it up a bit. There's many ways to do it. I'm going to use xylene as my chemical to kind of melt things. And so I'm going to take the turret and I'm going to start putting a coat of this on there. I don't want to get, well, I'm putting a pretty generous coat. just the areas that should look like they were cast, a cast texture. That's the areas that I want to get to. And while it's starting to dry, I just want to move my brush around, which should give it a nice textury look. I need a little bit more. So it looks like this red putty isn't going to dissolve as well as I wanted it to with the xylene. I have used like Squadron's green putty before, and used either aircraft dope or even Tamiya glue will soften that up. I have actually used Tamiya glue with this before. It may just be that I have some old putty, which I know I do, but it's just that automotive spot putty, that red automotive spot putty, and you can buy that pretty much any like AutoZone or Checker, Shucks, Kragen, whatever you've got around. That's usually where I buy it, and I'll buy a big tube, and that will last me several years. This one's probably lasted 7 or 8 years, and that's why I think it's starting to get a little bit raunchy, and hence it's not dissolving like it should. But it's hard to see in this video, at least with this lighting, but there's a nice little texture on there now. These old Dragon kits, I believe they're the old Italieri mold, and they just did not have any detail, any casting detail on the turret. So when I did my Fury kit with an Italieri, I used the Italieri kit, I also had to put texture on the turret as well. Because yes, these were cast, they did have a texture to them, these T-23 turrets. So I want to try and be careful not to get it on the hatch and some of these other details that weren't cast. So I kind of have to be careful with how I apply this. I'm going to keep it away from the cupola. And again, it has to do with moving it around, because what this is going to do, it's going to melt the plastic. And as it melts the plastic, and I move this brush around, it's going to move the melted plastic and give me that texture that I want. And like I said, it's kind of difficult on these Italieri T-23s because, well, they have stamping, they have a casting number there, and I don't want to obliterate that, which would be easy to do. And I could use a smaller brush, but this one actually works out fine for me. So, and I just want to go over it enough times with enough xylene. You could use Tamiya glue. There's other things you can buy, obviously, but I'm trying to show you kind of what I call the cheap and inexpensive way to do it, because I know if you start buying a lot of putties, a lot of other supplies specifically for this, that the costs can add up. So with xylene, I use it for a lot of different things in my modeling. It's a very versatile chemical for me, and this is where one of the places that it really excels, in my opinion. So we went from that smooth turret to something that has quite a little texture on it now. I don't want to overdo the texture, nor do I think I can overdo the texture, really. Because part of this is it will settle back down just a little bit. So make sure to get this area too. We'll see how this turns out when it's painted. Hopefully everybody will be happy with it. So there you go.
Well, here it is after a custom mix of Tamiya's olive drab with a little bit of Panzer yellow mixed in with it. So The texture's definitely there. I think it turned out just fine, especially for what I'm doing. Went ahead and painted those periscopes in kind of a blue, and you can see how the side turned out here. Well, hey folks, thanks for watching this 3rd anniversary show, and well, see you soon.